down.
Did you see the game last night? Of course you did, because you used Instacart to do your grocery restock. Plus, you got snacks for the game, all without missing a single play. And that's on multitasking. So we're not saying that Instacart is a hack for game day, but it might be the ultimate play this football season. Enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Service fees apply. For 3 orders in 14 days. Excludes restaurants. Instacart. We're here.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Wishing you a very happy half-off holiday, because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. And Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day. Yeah? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Hi there, and welcome again to the Explaining History podcast. Now, this is the second recording I'm doing today. The first I did earlier on, and it's kind of the sort of the end of the year podcast that I've been meaning to do for several years, and it's really my way of trying to say that this is always your podcast, and I think it's hopefully I've made that point as much as I can do. But anyway, back to resumption of normal service. Today I want to continue with the episode we did a few days ago on post-war American affluence, and what living standards meant for social class. Social class, in some ways, and here I am in Britain, it's a very class divided society. That was, earlier in the 20th century, more explicitly stratified through class. And there's an argument Melvin Bragg made years ago that culture has replaced notions of kind of economic stratification of class. I'm not sure whether I completely agree with that, but it's a movable feast, isn't it? America, I think that there's this notion, and I think it's false, that America is any the less stratified by class. There are notions of kind of greater egalitarianism and social mobility, but any society where there are people who are able to own and people who need to sell their labour is going to create social classes of people with shared class interests. There are social groups that are able to use their class power and wealth to buy politics and to buy media power, and then they tend to run things, and they run things through the medium of the Republican and Democrat parties. So class is definitely a thing in America, and class consciousness is and has always been there. there is a long, I mean, you read Howard Zinn or anything like that, there's a long history of American working class radicalism. And American working class radicalism at some point outpaces kind of everywhere else. So the notion of classlessness is a kind of a reassuring fiction. And because class has been so kind of inimical to the British experience, and our class system has been so pronounced, and because social mobility in the mid-century in America meant that working class people could quite easily, and this later happens in Britain, buy the trappings of class power, nice houses, nice cars, nice clothes, nice this, nice that. And now it's possible for anybody to own some of the trappings of privilege, even if it's very superficial. Then we can sort of sustain this fantasy of class not existing. I'm going to look now in James Patterson's Grand Expectations again, and this is how people talked about affluence and class in the 1950s and 60s. James Patterson writes, economic growth and affluence, many contemporaries thought, were further eroding class, ethnic and religious divisions in American society. The onset of the post-industrial society, they said, was ushering in a world of relative social calm and consensus. This notion was appealing, especially when it was used to differentiate the United States, prosperous and apparently harmonious, with the harsh and presumably conflict-ridden Soviet Union and other communist societies. And also, again, I argue, it was a way of differentiating America with Britain, differentiating a rising power with a declining one. It was also a notion that was highly debatable. For affluence, the great engine of change though it was neither all-embracing nor all-powerful. Now, I've recently been looking again at the Set the Night on Fire by Mike Davis and Mike Weiner. And there, when they do a kind of a potted history of the Watts Rebellion, and the huge violence that was meted out on people of Watts in Los Angeles, and the level of poverty and the social context of that, of the riots and the uprising, the idea that there was this egalitarian moment where wealth was evenly distributed in the mid-1960s is for the birds, really. Of course, in some instances, black living standards in the 60s improved. Yeah, they did. But it's highly selective. And there were pockets of extreme deprivation and poverty, not just black either. And the idea, and again, this is part of this kind of fantasy that at that point, kind of this corporatized American capitalism and later very kind of neoliberal capital sells, is that opportunity means that everybody can have a piece of this. If you don't get it, it's to do with hard work, the kind of hyper individualization of failure. There's nothing systemic about it. America is a land of opportunity, and opportunities must be taken. And there is a kind of a culture around hard work and effort and diligence, and also a kind of the emergence of this sort of self-help culture, which has always had a vein of hyper-individualism in it. Everything from Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, all the way to your Tony Robbins sorts of characters in the 1980s. Optimists who perceived the erosion of class distinctions pointed to the undeniable significant changes in the world of work. By 1960, some of the larger corporations, such as IBM, offered their employees clean landscape places to work, in as well as to work in, as well as benefits such as employer-subsidised healthcare, paid holidays, and sick leaves. Work weeks declined a bit to an average of around 40 hours in manufacturing by 1960. The greater availability of leisure time helped to drive the boom in recreation. By the early 1960s, millions of American employees could count on annual paid vacations, an unthinkable blessing for most people in the 1930s. Workers also benefited from the expansion of a social security program, a contributory scheme that paid benefits to the elderly from the collection of payroll taxes on employers as well as employees. By 1951, roughly 75% of employed workers and their survivors had become part of the system. Benefits were hardly high, averaging $42 a month for retired workers in 1950 and $70 by 1960. Retired women workers, most of whom had earned less while employed, generally received less than men, as did survivors. Still, growth in coverage and in benefits was of some help to millions of Americans. The number of families receiving Social Security checks increased from 1.2 million in 1950 to 5.7 million in 1960, and in the same period, the total benefits paid rose from 960 million to 10.7 billion. Labour unions, too, continued to secure improvements for working people. All of this, as happened in Britain during the 40s, 50s, and 60s, is greeted with horror by the right. The kind of William F. Buckley Jr. Figures on the fringe right. Britain and America have a kind of interesting parallel history in terms of social welfare, in that from the New Deal onwards up until the late 1960s, the enemies of the New Deal and the proponents of kind of classical liberal economics, or neoliberalism as it becomes, are exiled to the economic fringes. In Great Britain, the development of the welfare state, the National Health Service, all that kind of, and a mixed economy with heavy union involvement in planning and nationalised industries. Again, this is horror. This is like a living hell as far as people of the kind of the emergent neoliberal right in the Conservative Party and on the fringes, the kind of the Hayeks and the Montpellerian Society and all of that. They look at this with just they're aghast, and to them it is an assault on the very notion of freedom. And freedom is in this classic liberal sense is the freedom for money to do as it wishes. The freedom to be free from currency controls, the freedom for markets to operate unrestrained, the freedom for people, if they want to make money out of the bare essentials of life, like healthcare and housing, and to them the imposition of free or state subsidized housing and healthcare was something that affected the natural workings of this wonderful thing called the market, this kind of rather magical mental construct called the market. So in both these cases, social welfare is seen also as a kind of something that saps the vitality and the moral fibre of the individual. And is at odds with this in America, this kind of tradition of rugged individualism, which ultimately was a kind of a manufactured concept. The people who were the real proponents of rugged individualism, the people who settled the West, didn't use that term. This was a kind of a confected term in order to advance certain kind of right-wing policy goals throughout the second half of the 20th century.
Hi, this is Jonathan Fields from the Good Life Project, and today I want to talk to you about Boost Mobile. The holidays can feel like a blur with lists and plans and trying to make everyone happy. Simplicity can be its own kind of gift. Boost Mobile helps you keep things easy with the $25 unlimited plan that gives you unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month. No contracts, no trade-ins, just the freedom to keep the phone you love and focus on what really matters. Because peace of mind is something we could all use a little more of. Visit boostmobile.com to start saving today. After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 per month as long as they remain active on the Boost Unlimited plan.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here, wishing you a very happy half-off holiday because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day, yeah? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Why does every recipe I try need 18 ingredients, including a jar of something paste I'll never use again, but will sit in my fridge for 9 months? I just want dinner in the oven, fast. That's why I love Blue Apron's new one-pan assemble and bake meals. They send you fresh ingredients that are already chopped. All you do is put it all together and bake. That's it. No chopping, no weird leftovers, just delicious, easy-to-make meals. Get 20% off your first 2 orders with code APRON20. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
As in the past, these gains were far from universal. Some unions continued to exclude the unskilled, including large numbers of blacks or women. Labour leaders in the 1950s, moreover, largely abandoned hope of achieving governmental direction of such social policies such as health insurance, concentrating instead on wringing benefits from the employers. So this is a key change of strategy, and it has a lot to explain why America didn't ever develop a free at the point of use service like the National Health Service in Great Britain. You know, whatever you think of on this topic, Labour unions in the 50s decided instead of putting pressure on government to allow all people in the United States working and otherwise free access to healthcare, which was being established almost everywhere else in the world. Instead, they said it's better to look after your actual members. And how do you do that? Well, you go to the people that have got money to spend. You go to Boeing or Bell or Ford or whoever it is your guys work for and say, provide them in their terms and conditions with a generous healthcare package. And so that had the effect of making the workers in question quite loyal to the employer and identifying with them and identifying with the kind of the company, the product, the brand, as being, you know, the sort of like the medieval house to which they would be have been loyal ones. You know, a patronee kind of relationship. The result was that the United States continued to feature a social welfare system that was more private than in those of other nations. Again, and this has had, whatever you think of that, this has had undeniably long-standing and lasting consequences. Still, unions remained a force for many workers in the 1950s. In 1954, they represented nearly 18 million people. That was 34.7% of non-agricultural workers, a percentage second only to the 1945 high of 35.5%. Union leaders focused on bread and butter improvements, often succeeding in achieving higher wages, shorter hours, and better working conditions. Some secured guaranteed cost of living adjustments to their members. By the early 1960s, more than 50% of major labour union contracts included them. Unions also struggled to win benefits, or fringes as they became called. Many managed to negotiate contracts that solidified the advantages of employee seniority and that introduced clear-cut grievance procedures, sometimes with provisions for binding arbitration. These procedures were important, for they strengthened the rule of law in the workplace. They provided much cherished job security, so it's preventing arbitrary dismissal. I don't like you today, you're fired. And they helped management and labour avert strikes. This was the kind of thing that Reagan waged a war on in the 1980s. The idea that you could prevent people from being fired was a hindrance to business and capital power. The ability to sack people arbitrarily, to say, well, it's not working, no fault of anybody's, but off you go. The argument behind allowing that was that, well, it allows people to be hired more easily as well. If you can get rid of somebody, then you're much more likely to take them on in the first place and create a more mobile job market. This is not good news, though, if you're living paycheck to paycheck. These procedures were important, for they strengthened the rule of law in the workplace. They provided much cherished job security, and they helped management avert labour strikes. Friction hardly disappeared. A major strike in the steel industry, for instance, shook the nation in 1959. But the number of strikes and worker hours lost did drop dramatically after the highs of the mid-1940s and the early 1950s. As promising, Truman had huge problems with the unions and viewed them almost as traitors. It was assumed that he would be more favourable to the unions, but he certainly wasn't. As promising as these changes were, they did not fully capture the high expectations that gripped sizable numbers of American workers at the time. These workers, to be sure, recognised that American society remained unequal and that they were far too sensible to buy into myths about progress from rags to riches. But they were delighted to have the means to buy homes, cars, and household conveniences. And this is a really interesting kind of social moment in the history of America, and it's one that I don't think is really replicated in Great Britain, even though from the 50s onwards, mid-50s onwards, you do see a surge in living standards. But that surge in living standards and that kind of consumer boom in Britain is really led by the expansion of America as a world kind of economic behemoth. It kind of essentially rises living standards, lifts living standards through manufacturing and through exports, and through also being a great import market for British, European, and Japanese goods throughout the post-war era. But the working class family, the steel worker who has a nice detached home, 2 cars on the drive, has foreign holidays, and yet is able to be a kind of still remain in working class labour. That's something that it was kind of historically unprecedented. I mean, you see this in the kind of, I forget what the dad does in the Wonder Years, but the father in the Wonder Years is kind of a working class guy who lives a fairly kind of suburban bourgeois middle class life, just as Fred Flintstone does too. And I'm being flippant, but that was a cartoon of the time that visibly echoed kind of affluence and social relations in suburbia. And just as the Simpsons are really about the kind of life at the tail end of that, when it all starts to go horribly wrong. And so there was that moment in the mid-1960s, despite you looking at a society which is riven with ethnic and class conflict, for many workers, they have very fond memories of that time. And when you get to where we are at the moment, where this has all been devoured by financialization, neoliberalism, and offshoring, when it's a reasonable question for working class Americans to ask, where did all that go? Where did the nice company job go? Where did the affluent life in suburbia go? A lot of this is the product of cheap fuel prices. It's an economy that's run on cars. The new out of town suburban settlements require car ownership in order to access them.
Hey folks, it's Mark Marin from WTF. Today I want to talk to you about Boost Mobile, offering reliable nationwide coverage backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. Love your service or get your money back, no questions asked. Boost Mobile offers the coverage, network speed, and service you're used to, but at more affordable prices. Why pay more if you don't have to? You can get an unlimited plan for $25 a month that will never increase in price, ever. No price hikes, no multi-line requirements, no stress. Visit your nearest Boost Mobile store or find them online at boostmobile.com. After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 per month as long as they remain active on the Boost Unlimited plan.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. You know, one of the perks about having 4 kids that you know about is actually getting a direct line to the big man up north. Mm-hmm. And this year, he wants you to know the best gift that you can give someone is the gift of Mint Mobile's unlimited wireless for $15 a month. Now, you don't even need to wrap it. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Were such expectations realistic? According to the census definitions of occupation, the hopeful scenario seems to have been have had some validity. Thanks in large part to labor-saving technology, the percentage of people engaged in some of the most difficult and ill-paid work in mining and agriculture continued to plummet. As of 1956, the census also revealed that there were more Americans doing white-collar than manual labor. White-collar work. Millions of these upwardly mobile people swelled the migration to the suburbs, thereby depopulating factory-dominated neighborhoods where working-class styles of life had prevailed. Having broken away from their old neighborhoods, many of these migrants behaved in ways that at least superficially resembled those of the middle classes. For the first time, they bought new cars and major household conveniences, shopped in supermarkets instead of mom-and-pop stores, ate processed and frozen foods, which boomed in the 1950s, and dressed, at least while off the job, like many white-collar friends and neighbours. Given such developments, it was hardly surprising that some contemporaries thought that the United States had entered a post-industrial stage of capitalism in which class distinctions were withering away. In fact, nothing quite so dramatic happened either then or later. While the percentage of people defined by occupation as manual workers declined over time, the numbers of workers so employed continued to rise slowly but steadily from 23.7 million in 1950 to 25.6 million in 1960 to 29.1 million in 1970. If one adds the 4.1 million farmers and the farm workers and the 7.6 million service workers, a broad category that included janitors, maids, wait persons, firefighters, gas station attendants, guards and domestics, the 25.6 million counted as manual workers in 1960, one gets the total of 37.3 million Americans who used their hands on the job. This was 10.1 million more than the number designated as white collar at the time. White collar, moreover, was a misleading, capacious category. It included 14.4 million clerical and sales workers among its total of 27.2 million in 1960. Many of these people were ill-paid and semi-skilled. However one looks at these numbers, 2 points are clear. Blue-collar workers remained central to the economy in the 1950s, and classlessness, as defined by work, remained a mirage. Okay, so there we have it. Sometimes you got to crunch the numbers to look at the reality behind the fantasy. Classlessness is always a nice thing to proclaim, or at least to work towards, but where there are distinctions in the way things are produced through work and through ownership, and these produce kind of disparities in wealth and power, you'll always have social class. Anyway, guys, It's been a good one today. I've enjoyed this episode, so I'm going to leave you there, and I'll catch you tomorrow on one of the final podcasts before we shut up shop for a few days before Christmas. Take care, everyone.
With savings over $390 this shopping season, Vrbo helps you swap gift wrap time for quality time with those you love most. From snow on the roof to sand between your toes, we have all the vacation rental options covered. Go to Vrbo now and book a last-minute week-long stay. Save over $390 this holiday season and book your next vacation rental home on Vrbo. Average savings $396. Select homes only. Save over $200 when you book weekly stays with Vrbo this winter. If you haven't seen your college besties since, well, college, you need a week to catch up in a snowy cabin. Take a week-long vacation and save over $200. Book now at Vrbo.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Explaining History. This podcast is an independent production, and it's listener support that keeps these conversations going week after week. If you find value in the show and want to help cover the costs of research and production, please consider making a contribution. You can join our community on Patreon or make a one-off donation. Just follow the links in the show notes for this episode. Every bit of support is truly appreciated. Thanks again for listening.